Some new product video for the 6-11334 Southern Railroad Crescent Limited Scale Legacy 462 Pacific, cab number 1393. This locomotive is also available under 6-11335 for the Jersey Central Blue Comet Legacy 462 Pacific, cab number 832, and 6-11338, the Chicago and Alton Limited Legacy Scale 462 Pacific, cab number 657. When you take the locomotive out of the package, you will receive the locomotive in the tender, the instruction manual for the engine memory module, instruction manual for the locomotive, a nut driver for removing the side rod screws to replace traction tires when necessary, smoke fluid pipette for adding smoke to both the auxiliary and the main stack smoke, 2 replacement traction tires, an O-gauge dummy coupler which mounts on the pilot. It will replace the scale coupler to facilitate multiple unit consists with other legacy equipped locomotives. And finally, the engine memory module, specific to the road name and road number of this locomotive. These Legacy 462 Pacifics feature operating class lamps on the smoke box, operating headlight, main stack smoke, auxiliary whistle smoke, which is activated each time the whistle is blown, an operating cab interior lamp, which is on when the locomotive is at idle and turns off when the locomotive begins moving, a new smaller low profile IR tether on the drawbar, and finally it has an operating coil coupler on the rear of the tender. The Southern Crescent locomotive is equipped with 2 smoke units. One underneath the main stack. This is where the fluid goes in to fill that main smoke unit. And it's also equipped with an auxiliary smoke unit to power the whistle smoke. This is located underneath the rear steam dome. Smoke is added into this hole here for the auxiliary smoke unit. This cover has a small rubber O-ring on it. It's advisable to put a drop of smoke fluid on there to help lubricate that ring. That'll basically keep the smoke from coming back out the steam dome and only out of the whistle when it's activated. Underneath the front steam dome cover is where the switches are located. The switches are program run. You place the switch in the program position to assign a locomotive ID number to this engine with either TMCC1 or Legacy, and in the run position to operate the locomotive. If you're operating conventionally, program is used as your E-unit lockout switch to keep the locomotive running in one direction at all times. The second switch is the Odyssey 2 on-off switch. In the ODY position, Odyssey 2 is enabled. In the no ODY position, Odyssey 2 is disabled. The second switch, or third switch down, is your main stack. SMK is smoke on. No SMK is smoke off. And finally, the last switch is your auxiliary smoke unit, both the on and the off position. You are able to place either the main stack or the auxiliary smoke stack switch in the off position and use the other switch while it's in the on position. That's entirely up to you as the operator. The switches on your Legacy Pacifics, be it the Blue Comet, the Southern Crescent, or the Chicago and Alton, are all located on the underside of the locomotive. By moving the trailing truck aside, we can see that we have the auxiliary smoke unit in with SMK is for auxiliary smoke unit on, and no smoke is for auxiliary smoke unit off. The auxiliary smoke unit on these Pacifics is the smoking whistle. Then we have main smoke. No smoke, of course, is off, and SMK is on. Main smoke would be the stack smoke. Move the truck again. We have our program run switch. Place the switch in program to program a new ID number to the locomotive and run to operate it. In a conventional environment, run allows the reverse unit to cycle through forward, neutral, reverse, neutral, and forward. Placing it in the program position will lock the E unit in so that it will only run in one direction. Finally, the last switch is the Odyssey on-off switch. In the ODY position, that's on, meaning the speed control is enabled. In the no ODY position, that's speed control off. Underneath the water hatch on the tender deck is your master volume control for your sounds. You can increase and decrease the master volume of the sounds using that thumb wheel, or you can leave it set at maximum and adjust it manually using the cab 2 or cab 1 remote each time you operate the locomotive. Before we put the locomotive on the track, we want to always make sure that we do a little preventive maintenance. To do this, we're simply going to use some oil from the Lionel lubrication and maintenance kit that we've put into a needle applicator bottle. What we want to do is we want to put some oil, just a real light drop, on the axle for the collectors. And work that in with your finger. We also want to make sure that we put some oil on the axles where they go through the bearings in the frame. It's a very important step. It'll help you eliminate any possible squeaks that you can have when you get the locomotive running. And it's just good preventive maintenance. So you want to do that to all 3 of the axles on both sides. You want to also put a light drop of oil on the side rod screws, and then also on the eccentric crank where it goes through the eccentric sleeve and around the main rod spacer and the main rod. You want to do that for both sides. You can also put a drop of oil on the pilot truck, on the axle where it goes through the metal frame of the pilot. Work that in. All these legacy locomotives have a non-locking gearbox. You can roll these over while it's sitting on the bench. Work that oil in. Well, make sure you lubricate both sides, both the axles and the side rods and the eccentric crank. Even though the tender has plastic bearings for the axles, you want to still put a small drop of oil on the end of the axle where it inserts into the bearing, and then also right by the ground strap. And this will prevent any squealing from occurring when you're running the locomotive. The gearboxes are lubricated from the factory, so there's really no need to take the engine apart to lubricate the gearbox. You also want to perform the same steps on the tender. The important places to oil are the axle for the collector, right at the roller. Just a small drop of oil on each axle for the collector, and work that in. And then you want to put a small drop of oil on the ends of the axles where they insert into the bronze bearings in the side frame of the tender trucks, and roll that in. Again, you want to do the same for both sides of the truck, front and rear. Lubricate those. Some of the coil couplers that we've been getting recently on these models are a little bit stubborn. You'll fire the coupler. We're actually using DC current to fire the couplers now, so they fire much quieter than they did with TMCC1. However, sometimes the knuckle doesn't open all the way. Just a quick puff of some dry graphite lubricant once the coupler's open, right into the opening in the coupler itself, in the throat of the coupler, will really improve that operation. So if that happens to plague you on your locomotive, just a small puff of dry lubricant into the throat of the coupler, it'll solve your problem. Knuckle will work much more reliably. Before we program our Southern Crescent locomotive, we need to first tell our cab 2 everything about the locomotive. We do that by loading the orange memory module that comes in the box with the locomotive. Up on the front there's a label that says Legacy Southern Crescent 1393, which is the road number. What we do is we insert this module in the top of our cab. We remove the dust cover and insert the module with the silver circle L facing upward. Insert that. Using our numbering convention of the last 2 digits of the road number, we're going to address engine 93. Because our road number is 1393, we're going to use 93. Then we're going to press the info button in the upper right hand corner. And then we're going to press the load button, or the icon right below load on the top screen. It's going to tell us the module is inserted. It's a Southern Crescent 11334 Pacific number 1393. Load engine data, yes or no. We're going to press the button under yes. It's going to load the data. Engine data loaded. Remove module to continue. So we take the module out. What this has done for us is it's set up all of the operating features of our locomotive in our cab. So for engine 93, it has already assigned the name and the road number. We press the scroll button in the upper left hand corner. It's set our type to steam. Pressing scroll again, it's set our control to Lionel Legacy. This is important because now both the cab and the internal electronics in the locomotive will receive and also generate 9-bit serial commands so that you have all your legacy features, as opposed to 8-bit if you're using only TMCC1. Press the scroll button again and it's set our sounds to legacy rail sounds. To exit this menu, we simply press the info button in the upper right hand corner. Our road number appears momentarily. The name of the locomotive scrolls across the top, Southern Crescent Pacific. So now what we're going to do is look at what this has done for us by loading the module. The touchpad, when we address engine 93, road number appears momentarily. And the icons on the touchpad are different. They're numbered. We press the aux1 key and the icons on the touchpad change. They become the icons for volume up, crew talk, steam let off, volume down. The black circle is shut down. However, when you turn the red thumb wheel, you'll notice the bar will move across the top to tell us we're moving. That icon changes to a black triangle. The black triangle is emergency stop when the locomotive is moving. We have steam blowdown, tower comm, smoke off, smoke on, tender marker lights on, tender marker lights off, engine reset. That engine reset will simply tell the locomotive it's going to be at idle and it's going to be ready to start in the forward direction, and it will turn our smoke units off. This is not an engine reset like you get with programming. Finally, we have Rule 17 lighting on and Rule 17 lighting off. We press the speed bar and the icons on the touchpad change again. We have our 6 preset railroad speeds: tower comm, smoke off, smoke on. We have this bar graph that increases or decreases based upon the labor increase or labor decrease of the chuffing sounds. The way you obtain that is by pressing the FX up or the FX down button. I'm going to go ahead and press up. You'll notice that this bar graph increases in size, and the touchpad says labor increase up here on top. We press the down button, it says labor decrease, and the bar graph drops. Finally, this middle icon that says number 1 is for roll speed, and that will help the locomotive obtain the very first speed step that it's capable of obtaining. To exit this screen, we press aux1. We come back to the original icon set. Now let's go ahead and program the locomotive to engine 93 and run it through its paces. Before we get our Southern Crescent running, we want to make sure that we add smoke fluid. We're going to go and use the Lionel 6-37841 premium smoke fluid. We want to use this because this is the smoke fluid that's used every time the engineering department designs the smoke unit, and also because this is the fluid used in testing at the factory. So to add the smoke fluid, what we're going to do is use our premium smoke fluid along with our pipette that came with the locomotive. We're going to fill our pipette up roughly from the tip of the pipette about 3/4 of the way to the first line. Go and put that pipette down the stack. Add fluid, a couple puffs of air to knock out any meniscus in the stack. Underneath this steam dome cover here is the fill hole for the auxiliary smoke unit that drives the whistle. Again, we want to do the same thing. First time you put fluid in about 3/4 of the way to the first line. Put that down the hole, a couple puffs of air. And we can go ahead and put the stack cover back on. Okay, underneath the front steam dome is where the switches are. We'll go ahead and place that switch in the program position and apply track power. You'll notice that track power is now applied. None of the lights on the front of the locomotive or the cab light are on. This is normal operation. So using our cab 2 remote, we're going to go ahead and press engine 93. If you remember, this is what we told the remote the Southern Crescent was when we loaded the memory module. So go ahead and press engine 93 and the set button. The whistle confirms that the locomotive took the program. We'll go ahead and slide the program run switch back into the run position and replace the steam dome cover. Okay, so let's go ahead and get the smoke unit turned on. Press aux1 and smoke 3 times to get to high. Give it a few seconds to heat up. Blow the whistle a couple times, get the smoke coming out of the whistle. You'll notice the main stack still hasn't started producing smoke. Oh, there it goes. It's not untypical for the locomotive to take sometimes 15, 20, 30 seconds to start producing smoke. This is normal. So let's go ahead and hit a couple of icons here on the touchpad. We're going to press aux1 and tower comm.
This is the dispatcher. Please stand by. Over. Roger that. Holding for a signal. Out.
Scratch that, Filbert. Cut it out here. Okay, we've gone and turned the track power off, because I want to go ahead and play the crew dialogue on the startup for this locomotive. So we'll go ahead and apply track power. As I mentioned earlier, class lamps and headlight are off. Interior cab light is off. Power is on. So I'm going to press engine 93 on the remote. And in the lower left hand corner of the remote, I'm going to press and hold the power button. And you'll hear the crew dialogue before startup.
Dispatcher here. Do you copy? Over. I read you. Over. Please start her up and stand by for track orders. Roger that. Ready to move. Out.
Okay, now that it's gone through the dialogue and it's gone through its startup sounds, you'll notice the smoke unit starts smoking. The whistle smoke is working as well. There's actually 3 levels of intensity of the whistle smoke based upon the 3 levels of intensity of the whistle. So I'm going to go ahead and hit each level and hold it so you can see the difference in the smoke output. The bell. Crew talk.
Train is ready to go. Can I depart? Over. Negative. Hold your position. Over. Yes, sir. Standing by. Dispatcher here. Take the green. Over. Copy that. I have a clear signal. Out.
Smoke unit puffs in sync with the chuffing sounds. and this is consistent through all speed steps. Squealing brake sounds. Okay, this locomotive is also equipped with sequence control. What sequence control is a series of pre-recorded dialogues, messages that the locomotive will play based on throttle responses. To enter into sequence mode, you simply press and hold the aux1 or the straight arrow key for more than 3 seconds. You'll get 2 dings and a quick whistle toot to tell you that you have entered sequence mode. Let's go ahead and do that now. Okay, the locomotive has now entered sequence mode. So when we go to speed step 1, you'll get the crew dialogue. Locomotive will basically ramp up, getting ready to depart, but it won't actually start moving until you reach speed step 2.
We got your signal. I'm green. Over. Copy that. Out.
This is speed step 1. Now when I go to speed step 2, the locomotive will start moving, the bell will come on automatically and stay on until we reach speed step 24. Increase in speed, we'll get different crew dialogues. Let's go ahead and get over speed step 24. We shut the bell down. You still have manual control over all of these sounds while it's in sequence control, so if we want to turn the bell on, we can. And turn the bell off. You still have manual control of the whistle. But as you make different changes to the speed, you'll get different dialogue. So let's go ahead and get it up to a high speed. You'll see what I mean. When we make a drastic change coming down. Whoops, a little too far down. The longer you run the locomotive, the more dialogue you'll get. For instance, if you run this engine for 45 minutes to an hour, it'll actually start coming on and telling you that you need coal, you need water. As you slow down and stop, it'll tell you you've had a good run, a good head of steam, etc. It's a lot of interactive fun for you to experience with your new locomotive. Go ahead and slow this locomotive down and stop it. So now, I want to go ahead and play the emergency stop sequence for you. As I mentioned earlier when we were loading the module, there's a round black circle in the center of your touchpad. When the locomotive begins moving, that round circle turns into a black triangle. So let's go ahead and exit sequence mode. The way we'll do that is we'll press aux1 and hit the R button on the touchpad. The whistle confirms that we've left sequence mode. So let's go ahead and get the locomotive running. I'm I'm going to go ahead and hit that black triangle now.
This is the dispatcher. The emergency stop. Come to a full stop. Brakes on. In emergency. Waiting to stop.
Now everything from this point forward is based off your throttle response, so depending upon how quickly or slowly you turn the red thumb wheel will determine how quickly or slowly the train stops. Once you stop,
I'm in a full stop. We're all in one piece. Over. Good work. Out.
and now the emergency stop sequence is over. You can go ahead and run the locomotive. It's through. You can also add coal to your tender. This is done by pressing the aux 1 key or the straight arrow key and pressing and holding the R on your touchpad. As long as you hold the R down, it will continue to fill the coal. Once you're done, let off R and you'll get this dialogue.
My coal's full. Over. Roger that. Out.
Do the same thing for the water tank on the back of the tender. This is done by pressing aux 1 or the straight arrow key and what would be the number 3 position on the touchpad and holding it. You can continue to fill the water until you let off of that icon and get this dialogue.
My water's full. Over. Acknowledged. Out.
Okay, on the touchpad for engine 93, we have other icons on here as well, such as Rule 17 lighting on and off. All that does is changes the performance of the headlight. When the locomotive sits at idle, it's dimmer. When it begins moving, it's brighter. And we also have marker lights on and off. In this instance, because this Southern Crescent is not equipped with marker lights on the back of the tender, the class lamps are what is turned on and off. And we can turn them off, and we can turn them back on. And same thing with the headlight. Pressing aux 2 will turn the headlight off, and the class lamps, and back on. The locomotive is equipped with a rear coil coupler. We can open that by pressing the R coupler button on the cab 2. Get the sound, and the coupler pops open. And let's go ahead and play the shutdown sequence. So we'll hit the straight arrow key, aux 1, and the round circle in the center of the touchpad.
See you next trip. Out.
And once you go through a shutdown procedure, you notice that the smoke unit turns off, the auxiliary smoke unit turns off as well. In order to get the sounds to come back up again, simply press engine 93 on your touchpad and hit the power button in the lower left-hand corner of the remote. I'll do that now.
Dispatcher here. Do you copy? Over.
And the sounds will come back
I
up.
read you. Over.
These locomotives have shipped to your dealers. They should be in stock this week.
Roger that. Ready
We
to
hope you
move.
enjoy them.
Out.